There's a new effort to eliminate a cap on benefits given to families on welfare in Massachusetts. Currently, benefits are denied for children conceived while a family is getting assistance or soon after. Among those calling for elimination of the cap through state legislation are tonight's guests, a senior staff attorney with the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, Deborah Harris, and an attorney with Greater Boston Legal Services, Naomi Meyer. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I'll start with Deborah. I guess the rationale for a cap is that somebody said there are these families out there having too many kids and we're spending too much money on welfare. So in reality, what has been happening over the last 10 or 20 years or so?
Well, you're absolutely right. That was the rationale in 1995 when the family cap rule was enacted in Massachusetts. At that time, there were 103,000 families receiving cash assistance in Massachusetts. Now we're down to about 30,000 families receiving cash assistance, not because of the family cap, but for all kinds of other reasons. And families that receive cash assistance are about the same size as other families in Massachusetts. They have on average 1.8 children, so fewer than 2 children per family on average. It's about the same size as all families in our state.
Naomi, exactly how does this cap work the way we have it right now?
Well, the rule says that if a family is receiving cash assistance or has received cash assistance in the recent past and they have another child, that child will not be included in the assistance. So for example, the maximum benefit for a family of 3 currently is $578 a month. Not much for typically a mom and 2 children, not much to live on in the first place. But if one of those children is excluded under this rule, under the family cap, then they only get $478 a month. So $100 less because one child is excluded. And so then the mother is, of course, trying to stretch that money to support both of her children and meet all of their needs. And what we find when we talk to clients who are affected by this is that it becomes very difficult to meet those basic needs. For example, buying enough diapers for that new baby so that they can stay clean and dry. $100 a month isn't a huge amount, but it makes the difference between enough diapers or not enough diapers.
But what about how that can be maybe a crisis? Because you deal with clients, they got to pay the rent. They might have a child who has a medical dilemma. What goes on?
Well, they struggle. I would say that all families on TFTC are struggling to make ends meet because the grants are very low and have not actually been increased for inflation since the year 2000. But then when you add on to that the impact of the family cap, where they're not even getting the grant for the full number of people in the household, it makes it that much more of a strain. And as you said, paying rent and all of the other necessities, paying for food. A lot of families get food stamps as well, but food stamps often don't last until the end of the month, so they needed extra money to ensure their kids' nutrition, paying the light bill. All those basics just become a real struggle.
Deborah, also talk about what's going on with these families over time. I mean, Naomi's describing what happens when you're in this state of dependency, but I don't think these are people who want to be dependent indefinitely.
Most families do not want to be on welfare. When we talk to our clients, they would like to get off as soon as they possibly can. But if you have a very young child, maybe you don't have a lot of job skills or job experience, maybe you don't have the education that would enable you to get a job that can support your family. For many families, that is a temporary support. Some people need it for a longer time than others, particularly in cases where the parent has some disabilities. They may need the support for a longer period of time. But families don't want to be on assistance, and they certainly don't want to have a baby for $100 a month. Nobody wants that. Everybody knows that $100 a month is not enough for a baby, and nobody would have a baby for that tiny amount of money.
Naomi, how does Massachusetts fit in with the rest of the country on this particular question about having the cap?
Well, Massachusetts is one of 17 states that has a cap, some form of a cap And we, at this point, think that it's time for us to join the trend of the states that have been repealing their family cap. So in the 90s, around the time of welfare reform, first in Massachusetts and then nationally, 24 states altogether did choose to have a family cap at that time, and 7 of them have since repealed it, concluding that this is not an effective policy, hurts kids, and isn't something that the states wanted to do anymore. The most recent one to repeal was California in 2016, and so we look at that trend and we think that Massachusetts should follow along.
So no spike in dependency after repeal here, right?
They have not found, no. There hasn't been, families don't either go on or go off of welfare because of the family cap. The impact of the family cap is simply to make life much more difficult for children during the period when the family is receiving.
Deborah, what about the cost of repealing the cap? I mean, imagine it's going to cost something, but put that in the context with, the amount of money that's being sent overall and how that's been trending.
Well, the cost for repealing the family cap is about $13 million a year. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually a fairly small amount in relation to the amount that is spent on welfare. In 1995, when the family cap was enacted, the states spent $634 million on the state's welfare program. Now we're projected to spend $185 million. Only a few years ago, in 2012, we were spending $323 million. So we've had this huge drop in spending, which parallels the drop in the caseload. We can certainly afford to spend a small amount of the welfare money that we get from the federal government, which is a whole lot more than $185 million, on these families who are in such desperate need.
Finally, Deborah, you mentioned that you do have some more information about this campaign online. So what's the easiest way for people to find it?
The easiest way to find it is to Google Lift the Cap on Kids or look for our Facebook page.
Okay, thank you both very much for being with us. Up ahead, we'll hear about legislation to help students get a better start on literacy. But first, this message.